What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Output Lab Technique First podcast. I'm your host, Nick Nash, and welcome to episode number 3. In episode number 3, we're talking about the mental rep, why your mindset has a technique too. So let's just jump right into it. You'd never walk into a heavy clean with sloppy clean mechanics, but you walk into your day with a sloppy mental mechanics every single morning and wonder why you're depleted by noon. Or at least that was me. You walk in, most of us, we wake up, we hop straight on our social media after we kill the alarm. And if you're not super intentional about how you've curated your social media, you get filled with noise and a bunch of nonsense. So that starts your day off in a mentally cluttered and not high vibration, high frequency space. So the bridge. Physical technique has cues, progressions, and standards. Mental technique does as well. The same athlete who obsesses over a bar path has zero framework for their thought patterns. This isn't soft. This is mechanics. People think of this as a soft skill. It's a mechanic. It starts as a soft skill, but it's one of those skills that you never really perfect, and you work every single day of your life to hone a little bit, to get 0.5% better daily. And so what mental technique actually means. And so the first thing I want to talk about is energy, energy as capacity. So think about this as it's not motivation and it's not mood. It is essentially the foundation of everything. So when we talk energy, there's a bunch of different contexts for which we can talk in relation to energy. What we're going to do in this context is we're going to define it as capacity. And when we say capacity, think of it as your ability to output. Okay. So how I like to talk to people about this is I ask them the questions of, what do you do for yourself? That usually leads into a conversation of hobbies, if they have any, or if you're an individual that just outputs all the time, you will tell me what you do to output, and you'll either be stumped or we won't be able to have the depth of the conversation as to what you input. So I like to simplify it and talk to people about cup fillers or energizers, things of that nature. And ideally, what we'll say is, base level for every individual, you need 6 things that you do with intention for yourself every day. And ideally, 6 is the baseline. 6 is, it allows you to function optimally within your own life. If you can get that 6 to 12, then you're adding a little bit of buffer in between you and your day. Ideally, we like to think of 12 for individuals that have just themselves to worry about, and like a wife and a child, or an individual and like small teams, or 18 fillers if you have an individual yourself to worry about, a wife and a child, or a couple of children, and then either a large team at work. And so when we talk about capacity, this is the way I like to frame it. Think about it as when you wake up, you have $100 in your Energetical Bank Account. Wake up, cool, on $100, just right off the rip. And let's say you, as soon as you shut your alarm off, you hop straight on social media and you see some stuff that invokes in some sort of an emotion in you that's negative, right? So we'll take $20 out of your Energetical Bank Account. And then let's say on your way to work, someone cuts you off and almost makes you get in a car crash. There's another thing that takes 20 out of your Energetical Bank Account. And then right as you walk in, there is a fire that you ultimately have to put out. There's some sort of a problem. Then that's another 20 out of your Energetical Bank Account, right? So with those 3 things, let's just roughly say that's all $20. With those 3 things, you started at 100 when you woke up, and based upon those 3 things, now you're down to 40, right? And this is before 9 a.m. or definitely before noon. This is how a lot of individuals run their life, and this is why a lot of individuals essentially burn down, right? And all it really comes down to is how much capacity do you have, right? So in the same analogy, let's say you wake up and you do 6 intentional things for you, even 3 intentional things, and they don't have to be crazy. They can be like, I wake up and I intentionally take the time, the 2 to 3 minutes to wash my face, or I intentionally hop in a cold shower, or I intentionally sit down for 10 minutes and I meditate, do some breath work. I do some yoga, right? It doesn't have to be anything crazy. It doesn't have to be anything super time consuming, but it has to be done with intention just for you. So let's say you're able, for the sake of argument, you knock out these 6, right? So now your Energetical Bank Account goes from just $100 to $120. 6 times 2, 12. We'll just put 120, right? So now on your day, same scenario, instead of waking up and hopping on social media and seeing a post that invokes some sort of emotional response from you, now you've been intentional about your day, you filled your cup. And so let's say the same person cuts you off on your way to work. There's $20 out of your Energetical Bank account. Let's say when you get to work, there's the same fire you have to put out, right away. So then there's another $20 out of your Energetical Bank account. What that does is, because you've woken up and you've given yourself extra capacity for the day, you can therefore sustain higher output, and you can take on more stressors. So the 2 to 3 things that would have your glass, we'll say half empty, for lack of a better phrasing, will then end up, you still have a surplus. And so ideally the six fillers you do for yourself end up just being for you, and the 12 and the 18 you get to give from the overflow, right? Your extra capacity throughout the day. That can be your wife, can be your children, can be your small team, can be your large teams. But prioritizing yourself and your energy gives you a higher capacity, right? So it's not motivation, it's not mood. It is you being intentional with what it is that you do and giving yourself a higher capacity. And then with the other, what mental technique actually means, the next thing is thoughts are things, right? So thoughts in and of themselves carry a certain, we'll say, frequency. Based on the thought that you have, your body elicits an emotional either reaction or response to it, right? If it's an emotional reaction, then you've given it a negative charge. If it is an emotional response, then you've more than likely given it a positive charge, right? So thoughts are things. And when you have a thought that elicits an emotional reaction out of you, that, just like we talked about when people cut you off in the first example, if we don't have the skills or if we don't have the capacity to manage our mind, that just leads to we'll say a negative thought spiral or a tailspin. And so, taking the time to A, raise your capacity through doing things intentionally for you, and then B, just becoming aware of your thoughts. We're not working to change them. We're not working to judge them, good or bad, or anything like that. Just observing them for what they are. They're statements at a specific frequency. And when you can work to gain the skill of observation, of observing them, then you get to choose how you want to respond to them. Okay, I could go so far into that, but we're not going to right now. What sloppy mental technique looks like is essentially you are just reactive. I usually ask people, what's the difference between a reaction and a response? The difference between a reaction and a response is simply the breath. The more breaths you can take before you respond, the more likely you are to respond in a manner that, we'll say, for lack of a better phrasing, comes from your highest self, how you want to respond. If someone says something and you clap right back at them, sometimes it's a response. But if you take those intentional 1 to 3 breaths, be able to create some space in between what was said to you and the emotion that it evoked within you, then you're able to respond to whatever was said in a manner that you deem appropriate. And so reactive decision making's another avenue for what sloppy mental technique looks like is energy leaks, right? Doom scrolling on Instagram, doom scrolling TikTok. What else? We'll stay there for right now. Doom scrolling, doing things without intention. The more things that you do without intention, the more you are giving your energy away, and the more you give your energy away, the tougher it is to get it back, especially if you are not consciously doing things for yourself, right? It's filling your cup per se. And then misaligned identity, right? That's another big energy leak. So all that really means is, are you the type of person that does what you say you're going to do? If you tell the world that you're going to wake up at 3 a.m., do you wake up at 3 a.m.? Or because at 3 a.m. there's not that many people up, you wake up at 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. because nobody's going to know the difference. A lot of misaligned identity comes from these energy leaks that come from you not prioritizing yourself and your energy, right? So just some fun things to think about there. And then we're all looking to be the highest, well, most of us, I would say. I can't say we're all. That's too, I'm assuming too much. But most of us would like to be the highest version of ourselves in our every day-to-day life, right? We would like to be the type of person that we say what we're going to do, and then we do what we say, right? And so we'll call those in this phrase high performers. And so when a high performer, or a high performing individual, entrepreneur, CEO, business person, mom of 4 kids, right? Everybody wants to show up as the highest version of themselves possible. We'll call that the high performer, whatever that looks like for you. And when we have things like energy leaks, right? When I wake up and I just get my day going, I don't have a moment of stillness to be able to sip my tea or my coffee and ease into my day. And I have to make more of those reactive decisions. I don't get to choose how I respond. It's just, okay, this happens, I'm going. This happens, I'm going. This happens, I'm going. That can look like functioning on the outside, and functioning at somewhat of a high level, but ultimately what it leads to is smoldering on the inside. Think of like when a house is burning down. Sometimes there's not huge flames on the outside. In the beginning, there's not huge flames on the outside. But if you walk into a house that's on fire, sometimes on the inside, the infrastructure is burning down, smoldering down from the inside before it catches a blaze. And for those individuals that are required to be high performers, CEO types, moms, entrepreneurs, we are smoldering on the inside because we're focused on output. But you can only output to what your capacity is. And you can output a little further than what your capacity is, but not for a long duration, right? The more you output and you don't have energy, the more you're in your sympathetic nervous system, that fight or flight, and the higher your cortisol is throughout your body. We talked about this at the last podcast or podcast before. The whole goal of recovery, the whole goal of being intentional with your time for you is so that way you can lower the sympathetic tone. That way you can turn the volume down on your sympathetic nervous system and turn the volume up on your parasympathetic nervous system, your rest and digest. And so the same rule applies with your mental technique as with your physical technique, right? It's not one of those things where you're like, okay, cool, I'm going to set up for this snatch. I'm going to use this one cue, and this one cue is just going to have me set for the rest of my life. You have to practice that singular cue over and over and over and over. You have to practice it at 45% of your one rep, at 50%, at 60%, at 70%, at 80%. So then that way, when you get up to 90% and above, it is a habit at that point. It's not something you have to consciously think about. So these mental reps are the exact same way, consistency over intensity. Think about this as the lowest barrier of entry. So as you're listening to this podcast, as I'm talking about some of these energy as capacity things, maybe some of the cup fillers, and you're thinking to yourself, wow, I really don't have anything that I do for myself. I'm doing for everybody else. I just want you to know I love you and I see you. And the only thing I would ask of you is do something for you. Do something intentionally for you. We'll say 1 to 3 things. Just start out that way. Start out simple. Lowest barrier of entry. You do 1 to 3 things daily for yourself over a 7-day span. I promise you are going to feel drastically different inside of your own life. You're going to feel way more fulfilled. You're going to feel way more joy. You're going to be way happier. And then everything on the outside just tends to get a little bit better. And then you can't PR your way out of a technique deficit in either lane. So if you are loading up your barbell with 90% of your one rep and you are not in a good headspace, you are not going to be able to lift that barbell. Same thing is if I'm walking up to this barbell thinking, man, I can't do this. I haven't done anything for myself. I'm stressed out. I'm reactionary. There's a really good chance that you're not going to be able to move that barbell to your highest capacity. And so that is why the talking about the mental side is why there's technique there, right? Just like we can focus on having our feet narrow, our chest up, pressing through the floor, and relaxing our hands to get the barbell into our front rack in a power clean. We also have to work with the same diligence in regards to what's going on between our ears. Are we being present with ourselves first and foremost? Am I eating nutritious food? Am I drinking enough water? Am I taking time in between responses with loved ones or at work or whatever? Am I being intentional? The more intentional you can be with yourself, the more selfish you can be in regards to giving yourself energy, the more ultimately selfless you can be. And that translates into your own life. That also translates into the gym. The more you can give yourself energy, the easier it is going to be for you to start to push your limits. If you're burning down on the inside, if you're smoldering, if you're low energy, you will not be in a space mentally, emotionally, physically where we can push you, give you a gentle nudge to get the most out of you in that session. And don't get me wrong, we talked about intensity a couple of podcasts ago. Intensity is wonderful, but it's not an every time or every place type of thing. Some days you walk into the gym, you're beat up, you're mentally tired, you're emotionally drained. Maybe your baby was up all night long. Maybe your partner didn't sleep. Maybe someone's sick in your household. Maybe you're stressed out of your mind because of work. And on those days, majority of the time, just manage your thoughts, understand that, there's a lot of external factors and external pressures, and give yourself a little bit of grace when you go into the gym. What I will tell you though is on some of those days, if you allow yourself to be gently nudged with some coaching, then I have seen people PR on days when they didn't feel like coming to the gym, when their body was hurt. I've seen more people PR than you would think. Thinking recently, I had a gal come into one of my classes and she was just like, I'm beat, bro. I'm freaking beat. And she was like, I don't want to do these box jumps. I don't want to whatever. And I was like, okay, cool. That's fine. We have a long time to do these. I ain't even worried about it. And so before we even started the workout, I looked at her and I was just like, hey, at the end of this, just be open to jumping on a high box, because you never know what's going to happen. Some days you PR on the days you don't feel like doing anything. And she looked at me and she's like, okay, yeah, that's very true. And so then we went about the workout. And in her last round of the workout, I walked over to her and I just gave her one of those looks, one of those looks the coach gives you, like when you have too much light weight on the barbell, like you're under living what your capacity is. I looked at her and just looked at her like this. She was like, okay. She flipped the box up one, and ultimately, long story short, she ended up jumping on a box that jumping on a box at a height she's never jumped on before. A height that 2 weeks ago when she was feeling mad energized, she was too in her head about. So I say that to say, sometimes on those days when you feel low energy, low capacity, be open to the possibility of something great still happening. Just be open to it. Don't shut it down completely. And that comes from A, good coaching, but B, also being open within your own right. Some days you're just beat up. It happens. We're human, right? We're outputting all the time. It happens. But also on those days, just remember, there is an opportunity, whether it's 5%, whether it's 10%, there is an opportunity to get better and an opportunity to surprise yourself. So with that being said, one thing I would like you just to try this week after listening to this podcast is notice a moment in your own life where your reaction ran ahead of how you wanted to respond. How will I know if that happened, Nick? Let me tell you. So if there is a moment when you clap back at somebody after they said something to you, spouse, somebody in the gym, one of your kids, someone at work, whatever, and you clap back and that moment is gone. And if you catch yourself thinking about that particular moment at any point in time after that incident happened, maybe, just maybe, in that moment you were a tad bit reactionary, right? Take a couple breaths, create a little space in between the thought and the emotion around it, and see if you can come to a different way that you possibly could have responded. Don't spiral on it. Don't incessantly think about it. Just give it a whirl. See if there was a different way that you could have responded, right? Or when someone makes a statement, when someone asks something of you, take 1 to 3 breaths before you give them an answer. And just see if, when you take those 3 breaths, if that changes A, how you feel, and B, how you think about how it is that you're going to respond. And so, yeah, just wanna recap. We talked about how energy is capacity, or capacity is energy, right? Through cup fillers, it's not motivation, it's not mood, it's really how you prioritize yourself in your life. And then we talked through how thoughts usually are statements within the brain that elicit an emotional response in the body. It can be positive, can be negative. And then what sloppy technique looks like, it looks like just being reactive and not being responsive. Again, the difference between a reaction and a response is the ability to take 1 to 3 breaths before you speak, and making sure that when you speak after those 3 breaths, you're coming from your highest self. And we talked about high performers, right? Whether you're a high performing mom, taking care of things at the house, whether you're a high performing entrepreneur, holding it down in business, whether you're a CEO of a company, how you can be functioning on the outside, how you can be functioning at a high level on the outside and smoldering on the inside. So if anything we talked about in today's podcast resonated with you, what I would ask is just leave me a comment. Tell me what you liked. Tell me what you didn't like. And yeah, I greatly appreciate the feedback. And if there's things you want to hear more of, let me know, because I love talking about this stuff. So again, that's the mental rep, why your mindset has technique too. Thank you for your time.